Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar brought to you by Bursa Malaysia and managed by our company LifeChamp. Our webinar title today is Fundamentals You Must Know About Investment Notes. Welcome, everybody. My name is Shen Chu. I'm the moderator for this webinar. Now, we have talked at length about equities, about derivatives. Today, we are going to assess a very special asset class, which is debt. Okay, today we're going to talk about investment product called investment notes under P2P financing for you to understand what exactly are investment notes and how can it help you to complement your portfolio. Before I begin, as usual, disclaimer, whatever we share in this webinar is only for educational purpose. In no way that we give any recommendation for you to buy or sell any listed products that we mentioned here. If you decide to make any investment decisions, you're 100% responsible for all your investment risk. Now, allow me to briefly introduce our speaker today. He is the Senior Relationship Manager in Origination and Marketing of BR Capital, and he's responsible for business development and marketing for the platform. He brings with him over 10 years of experience in banking and advisory prior to joining BR Capital. He is none other than Mr. Sebastian Yong. So, Sebastian, how are you today?
Good. How are you, Shane?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you so much for joining our session. So, we know that this is the first time you speak to our audience about P2P financing, so we can't wait to learn from you about investment notes. All right, so we will just hand over the screen control to you, Sebastian.
Sure. All right. Good evening to all our audience online, Shane to you as well. So ultimately, just as introduced by Shane, today we're going to talk about investment notes and what are the fundamentals that you should be looking out in terms of consideration to put your money to work in investment notes. So standard disclaimer, this live stream is basically just for information purposes only. It's educational, and I think the rest of the disclosure has been discussed by Shane. So without further ado, so in terms of my background, 10 years mainly in banks. I was with a couple of banks, local and also foreign. I'm now with BR Capital, a subsidiary of Bursa Malaysia. BR Capital is actually a joint venture between Bursa Malaysia and also RAM Holdings. Bursa owns 51% in the platform, while the remaining 49% is actually held by RAM Holdings. So essentially, we are basically a digital credit platform, recently launched just late last year in December, and we are, of course, regulated by SE Malaysia. So in terms of the common consideration of investors when they're looking out with any investing opportunities out there, right? I guess in terms of the Malaysian context, we're well aware of the common ones such as fixed deposits, savings income, of course, the dividend yield stocks listed on Bursa Malaysia, bonds, sukuk, and also bond funds. I think also a common investment theme in Malaysia is also real estate, and somewhat, in some sense, REITs as well. But today we will be focused on income generating product, which is investment notes. So essentially, investment notes are a form of alternative investment. I think, like I mentioned earlier, in terms of the Malaysian context, real estate is actually a very common theme that most investors would be interested in. It is, in fact, a form of alternative investment. Besides real estate, there's also, of course, precious metals such as gold and silver, thereafter, there are also alternative investments such as arts, collectibles in the form of, I think the common ones these days are luxury watches. I mean, abroad, some are actually collecting vintage cars. It is also a form of alternative investment. In terms of digital assets, I think especially the Gen Zs, a lot of them are keen to look out for NFTs and also assets listed on Metaverse. Private equity, venture cap, and also ECF is something that's not so popular in Malaysia. But of course, it's growing, and it's a growing industry. Later, I'll show you a bit of the data. But today, what we would like to present is more on private debt, so private credit. So we'll zoom in even further in terms of private debt, so private credit, and scope in particular to P2P. But of course, there are also other types of instruments under the private debt, so private credit space, which I'll go further. So in terms of the market, global market out there, specifically the private credit market, as you see on the left chart, it's actually a growing theme considered by a lot of investors. So 2013 to 2023 is basically at least double. In the Malaysian context, P2P as well has grown tremendously, as you see on the right chart. From 2019, just 0.4 of a billion, and now the closest data which we have as of 2023, it's at 2.1 billion at the moment. So in terms of the key differences between credit investing and also equity investing, if we start off with the credit investing space, so typical investment type of credit investing here in Malaysia are investment notes and other forms of debt securities that are essentially tradable. In terms of risk and return, generally credit investing as compared to equity investing is less risky, more predictable in terms of receiving your income as an investor. But of course, in terms of ownership and control of the company, as a credit investor, you would have as compared to being an equity investor. In terms of income generation, typically when investors look at credit investing, typically they want a stable and periodic interest payment to their investment. In terms of the horizon, credit investing is actually a defined maturity date towards receiving your principal in return. In contrast with equity investing, of course, the common ones that we all keen, especially, are actually listed entities with some Malaysia. But of course, there are also other unlisted shares of companies out there. In terms of risk and return, as compared to credit investing, equity investing are typically higher risk, but potentially also higher return. In terms of ownership, as an equity owner, you have voting rights over the company and also possibly influence over the issue. In terms of generation of income, typically what a lot of investors expect these days, especially, are steady dividend payments, typically annually. So in terms of horizon of investment, usually the issuers do not affix a certain period of return of investment to investors. But at the same time, investors can actually choose to hold or potentially dispose them at the secondary market. So as I mentioned, today's topic will be focusing more on investment notes. So essentially, investment notes are a form of monetary loan from investors to issuers. Issuers typically use the money to basically grow and expand their business to a certain size that they intend to. Um, in terms of the overview of the P2P framework in Malaysia, so SC actually provides a guidelines to RMOs, including BR Capital. So specifically, in terms of P2P, there are two forms of P2P platforms. One being the MTC space, the other being the rest. So BR Capital is actually on the left-hand side, which BR Capital is more focused on mid-tier companies. Of course, BR Capital is also keen to help out PLCs that are looking for financing. In terms of hosting of investment notes, platforms such as BR Capital are basically allowed to host investment notes that are not less than 5 years. But in terms of the other P2P platforms, they are able to host less. So this is actually an overview, a typical ecosystem of P2P platform. So essentially, issuers go to the platform to basically ask for fundraise to be hosted on the platform. In terms of issuers, prospective issuers can be listed and unlisted entities, typically incorporated ideally. In terms of the fundraise purpose, it can be for capital expenditure or working capital. Investors-wise, caters to a wide range of investors, basically from retail investors, angel investors, all the way to sophisticated investors. So essentially, how the platform works is the platform will basically work typically with the issuers to understand the business and also the expansion plans. If it passes the respective platform's due diligence, the platform will allow the issuer to host their investment note on the platform, and thereby allowing investors to subscribe and also invest in the particular investment note. So the merits of investment notes are quite simple. Essentially, as I mentioned earlier, investors that are investing in investment notes will basically receive a promised interest, typically upfront, and also in the event that the investment note and of course the issuer is successful, of course they will receive the principal as well. So in terms of yield enhancement, typically investment note investors are keen to invest basically for yield enhancement on their cash. So typical investors such as myself, retail investor. I am a retail investor, so what I would do is I would put money into FD, any excess cash, and hopefully get maybe perhaps 2 to 4% interest rate from my bank. But essentially, what investment notes are allowing these investors to achieve is basically a higher yield as compared to the typical FD or savings rate. It can go as high as 18%, but of course, investors would have to pay attention to the details in terms of the risk versus the returns. So as I mentioned earlier, typically investors that are looking or keen to invest in investment notes are looking for stable and also recurring income stream. They are also looking to diversify their portfolio. So in terms of diversification, various investors would have different goals and also different risk tolerance. So what most platforms will actually suggest to the general public is to invest in specific investment notes that suit your particular risk tolerance or preferences. in terms of the principles of credit investing, essentially there are 5 C's of what we should pay attention to as credit investing. So number one, of course, is the ability by the issuer to actually repay back the principal. Ideally, of course, what you would intend to receive is also the interest, and all in Islamic context, the profit payments issues. So, of course, in any investment, you would want the business owner to basically have a skin in the game, put down a set of percentage towards. So, say for example, if a business owner were to invest in a factory, you want a certain down payment or deposit from the business owner. Say for example, 20% or 30%. So there's basically skin in the game. In the event that the particular business owner manages to secure debt capital or P2P fundraise through the respective P2P platforms, the business owner would be basically committed to run the business smoothly, correctly, abide to the laws and regulation, and of course, ultimately pay you back as an investor. So, in terms of collateral, typically, say for example, as an individual, you to get a mortgage from a bank to basically buy a property. Basically, the property is held in custody by the bank. So the same with P2Ps. In some cases, some platforms actually do ask for collateral in the event that if the business is unable to repay you back, they will basically go liquidate the particular asset that was pledged to the financing. In terms of conditions, of course, as an investor, basically have to pay attention to all macro and micro economic conditions, and also various analysis that you should be doing to keep yourself informed and abreast with your investment. Also, in terms of character, ideally, what part of the due diligence of the platform would be checking through the credit behavior of the business owner, making sure that there's no irregularity in terms of the business owner not paying certain, say for example, utility bills or even banks.
Sebastian, I think you might want to speak closer to your microphone so
Sure,
that.
sorry. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So in terms of the P2P platforms out there in Malaysia that are registered and approved by SC, there are namely 13 out there under Bursa Malaysia, and it's listed as number 2, Bursa Malaysia Brand Capital. If you'd like to find out more about the other P2P platforms out there, you can visit this site on SC's webpage. So bottom line, in terms of any form of investments, never ever put all the eggs in one basket. Always try to diversify. Always, with regards to building a portfolio, always consider all options on the table. Don't, especially when it comes to P2P, look out for the irregularities and also pay attention to the detail. So, for example, particularly to P2P platforms, there might be, say, for example, 10 investment notes out there. Pay attention to the details provided by the platform, and ideally spread your eggs. Don't just put all your cash into just one particular issuer. ideally you spread it out, of course, within your risk tolerance. Ultimately, it's also about being realistic. Whenever you look at higher any investment product that are out there, with any higher promise of returns, there's always higher risk. So, like I mentioned, always study any facts or information provided by the platform. Ideally, search on the web on the company that you're keen to invest. Understand the business. Look through and basically understand also the credit rating report if it's provided by the platform, and also of course the fact sheet. In terms of investment platforms, of course, try to stick within those that are regulated and also approved by SC. Yeah. So in terms of what Bursa has to offer, like I mentioned earlier, we do have a P2P platform. It's called BR Capital. Feel free to actually scan the QR code or visit our website directly. If you have any specific questions that you have, feel free to email us at the email address on the screen. It's brcsupport@bursamalaysia.com. Yeah, thanks, Shane.
Oh, that's the last slide, right?
Yep, correct.
Okay, so if you have any questions to ask our speaker today, you may write your question in the Q&A box, not the chat box. Okay, write them at the Q&A box. So listen, just now you say BR Capital is ranked number 2, right? That is because
It's not a rank.
alphabetical order, right?
By all means, it's not a rank. Yeah, it's by alphabetical.
Okay. So is your platform ready right now
It
for?
is for retail investors. You can actually visit our website here and go through the onboarding process online.
Oh, okay. So when they scan the QR code, they are able to onboard as a retail investor, right?
It will link you up to our website. From there, you can see the button for the registration.
All right, understand. So how many issuers are there on your platform already?
So for now in our pipeline, we are working on at least 3 that we are hoping to host sometime by this month or next month. But of course, there are multiple companies that we are also working with to help them fundraise through our platform.
Okay, understand. So I've seen the question from Eugene is how are investment notes different from bonds, especially the corporate bonds?
So it's a very different framework. Wouldn't go much into the bond space, but essentially P2P platforms are actually regulated under the RMO space, the recognized market operator space, whereas bonds, it's in a different framework. So essentially, if I may go back to my earlier slides. Yeah. So essentially, it's slightly different. Platform-wise, we aim to raise the intended amount that issuers come to us to raise, thereby after going through the respective processes, we will actually allow the hosting of the investment note on our platform, and then they're allowing investors to basically invest in the specific investment note. So in terms of investment note, some platforms can go as low as 50 ringgit a unit, and BR Capital, it's at least 100 ringgit per unit, but still relatively bite-sized investments. Whereas if you look at the bond space, it's slightly different. It's a much larger amount, and also, of course, different risks, basically.
Thanks, Sebastian. Cindy would like to ask, is the registration free of charge?
Yes, it is free. It is free. Yeah. So it's relatively simple process for retail investors to come on board and register as a retail investor.
All right. Iqbal would like to ask, investment note can pay up to 18% per annum, like what you say. Could you elaborate more than that?
So the 18% per annum is actually capped by regulation. But of course, like what I mentioned, the higher the rate of promised return, the higher the risk of the particular investment. So if you elaborate, if I may elaborate further, in some contexts, some platforms such as BR Capital have a rating scale, and the rating scale is basically split between investment grade and also non-investment grade.
So typically, non-investment grade will be able to fetch up to 18% per annum. Am I right?
Possibly.
So what would be the range for investment grade kind of P2P?
There's multiple variables to it, but typically, I can only speak on BR Capital. It ranges between 6 to 9% for investment grade investment notes.
Okay, 6 to 9%.
Yeah, but of course, the variables can be potentially market driven, and multiple factors out there. Provided, of course, if speaking in BR Capital's context, also subject to the issuer's tolerance.
Okay, I see. So SC limit them at most is 18% per annum, so
By
they can't
regulation.
provide more than that.
Yeah.
Okay. So far I have not seen more than 10%. Typically the investment note I've seen is 9%.
Yep.
10%. I think these are more common returns that I've seen.
Yep.
So I will be intrigued to find any investment that offer 18%. I want to evaluate business fundamentals.
Again, I have to remind that if it goes double digits, obviously there will likely be higher risk.
Would that be capital guarantee?
Unfortunately, I can only speak on BR Capital's context. Unfortunately, it might not be guaranteed in terms of the principle, but we are of course working with partners to basically form some sort of guarantee from respectable guarantors, guarantee agencies, basically.
Right. Yeah. The next question I have on my screen is, what is MTC? I think one of your slides.
MTC stands for mid-tier companies. So basically, just to put things in context, if we are looking at as MSMEs, typically split between services and also manufacturing companies. If it reaches a threshold above of the MSME definition, then in terms of size of the companies, mid-tier basically basically above the MSME definition, but of course smaller than larger companies, large entities.
All right. Tori would like to ask, is the 18% referred to as yield or coupon?
Typically, it's yield, but of course it ties hand to hand. So in terms of coupon, it can be quarterly or half yearly, or some cases monthly as well. So coupons are the respective payments by the issuer, promised by the issuer. But in terms of per annum context, 18% is actually the maximum by regulation.
All right. Is there any management fee or other fee associated with this P2P investment note investment?
Um, Again, I can only speak in the context of BR Capital. BR Capital, we have a low fee. It's stated on our website.
No fee.
Low fee,
A low fee.
yeah,
Okay.
low fee, yeah, very low fee. Also, because we would like to encourage direct investments without going through a middle party, thereby doing away without, say, for example, fund management fees, trustees fees, and other sorts of fees.
All right. The next question I have on my screen is that how secure is this BR Capital platform?
In terms of investment notes, I'm guessing. So again, in terms of BR Capital, we are quite stringent in terms of how we look at companies. Ideally, we try to stick towards the investment grade. Of course, in some other circumstances, we might look at companies that are non-investment grade. But in terms of our pipeline, the three issuers, some of them are actually unlisted, basically. One of them are actually the business owners are actually providing personal guarantee. Another one is actually a subsidiary of a listed company of Bursa Malaysia. That particular issuer is so the holding company will be providing corporate guarantee.
I
But
see.
yeah. But by no means the principal or rather the investment amount given by investors are 100% protected in terms of principal. Just wanted to clarify that.
I see. Just help me to understand this. So the subsidiary of a listed company has chosen to go for alternative financing to raise money through the debt market. Am I right?
Right, that's right.
Okay. So is there any minimum investment amount that you're looking at? BR Capital is looking at.
So each unit is 100 ringgit. You can actually invest even in one single unit on BR Capital.
100 ringgit is the
So
minimum.
So it's as low. Investment amount is actually as low as 100.
Are there any maximum tenure these investment notes like SC regulate that cannot be more than 10 years or 5 years?
In BR Capital's context, there isn't, but there's actually a requirement to only allow hosting of investment notes that are over 1 year. At least just to clarify, a minimum of 1 year tenure, but there's no maximum.
Okay, minimum is 1 year. All right. I've even seen investment note that is just for like trade financing.
Yeah, it's quite common. Supply chain financing, invoice financing.
Yeah, I've seen that many times. So for that, you don't do shorter than 1 year, correct?
Yeah, minimum at BR Capital is actually 1 million.
Okay.
1 year.
One year. Okay.
Yeah.
So also when it comes to investing in investment notes, what are the associated risks that retail investors like us need to be aware of?
Yeah, so just going back to my slides earlier, uh, pay attention to the 5 C's that are highlighted here. So number one, of course, knowing which business you're giving money to, ultimately to ensure that, there's no 100% guarantee, but of course, just pay attention to details like I mentioned. look at the fact sheet, look at the credit rating report, understand the business, take basically an opinion of whether you think that particular business can actually repay you back in the time frame that they have promised. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Sebastian. The next question by Ang is that what is the gradation of the credit risk and how does credit evaluation and ratings conducted?
So for BR Capital, if I may clarify,
Maybe you can
maybe,
answer. Maybe we can address this question on the industry landscape, also BR Capital.
Maybe I'll start off with BR Capital. Of course, RAM being our basically partner, they will go through the credit aspects as well as the ESG aspects of the business. So RAM being in the rating bond and sukuk rating space for since the 1990s, they of course would have the pedigree and so the background to go through and understand what the businesses intend to fundraise for, or track record of the business, many other aspects of it, including economic conditions. With regards to the other P2P platforms, might not be able to comment, but essentially what I understand, they might have their own internal rating scale as well.
All right, thanks, Sebastian. The next question is, can investor withdraw the investment before the terms complete, or are there any penalties? So this question is asked by Wayne.
Yep. So some P2P platforms are actually working on the secondary market. For if the secondary market is liquid enough, investors may actually be able to sort of dispose their investment ahead of schedule.
Okay, thanks, Sebastian.
Thank
you. Cindy would like to ask, what is the difference between unit trust and investment note?
Very different, very different. Unit trust is somewhat indirect, whereas investment notes are listed or hosted on P2P platforms. Typically, generally, they are more direct. So you're actually investing a particular business, whereas unit trusts might be basically a pool of various businesses out there, put under one fund.
Yeah. So if you invest in unit trust, you're essentially buying a portfolio, investing in the equities of a portfolio of stocks. If you invest into investment note, you're actually lending money to the company. Yeah. So this is a credit investing versus equity investing. So equity investing is more indirect because you buy through a fund. Yeah. Then the next question is, what is the difference between warrant and investment note?
Again, very different. Warrants might not be the topic expert. Again, warrants can be direct and also potentially indirect. But investment notes are strictly direct in terms of your investment going to a particular business.
Yep. So the next question is on why. So why would a company resort to or go to P2P financing versus going to get a loan from the bank? Is it because they don't have the credibility to obtain the loan?
So in terms of credit worthiness, typically, issuers can go to P2P platforms for various reasons. Potentially, sometimes they might be looking to diversify out of their standard operating activities. Banks typically sometimes also want some form of collateral, and also, of course, sometimes banks might impose certain stringent terms and conditions that might not be palatable to the issuers. So hence why issuers basically can look out for alternative financing or fundraise avenues, such as raising an investment loan through an P2P platform.
All right. Iqbal would like to ask, are the companies, that listed on BR Capital based in Malaysia or in ASEAN region or other part of the world?
So one of the criteria that they have to meet to become an issuer of BR Capital is that they have to be actually incorporated in Malaysia.
All right, but doesn't have to be
So
a Malaysian owned lah. It can be a
foreign
foreign.
owned, yes,
Okay.
correct.
Jason would like to ask, what is the default rate for BR Capital and what is industry average default rate?
I can't speak about the default rate industry-wise, but specifically for BR Capital, we haven't yet hosted any investment notes. We are looking to host a couple within this month or sometime in July. So basically no, definitely no default cases so far, because there's no issuance via BR Capital yet at the moment.
All right. So if they default, the next question is, what are the actions that will be taken by BR Capital?
So basically, we will have to go through a default or recovery management process. It's clearly stated within the respective agreements. You can refer them or refer to the agreements on our website. It's quite clearly stated, but essentially, what the process will be is that investors would basically have to vote in terms of the next course of action towards recovering the, 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 the investment amount that they've put in. So if the investors actually vote to basically go ahead and go through a litigation process, there will likely be other. Basically, we would have to likely, as the platform collects a certain amount, to proceed with the litigation process.
Thank you so much, Sebastian.
Thank you.
Sharon would like to ask, can you flash the slide of the slide where you show the P2P platforms, all the P2P platforms?
Yep.
I think it's
all.
Yeah, this one. I guess I think Sharon refers to this one.
Yep.
All right. So Shireen would like to ask, do we know which note to invest, or it is going to be a blanket note?
At BR Capital, if I understand the question, so basically, investment notes hosted on BR Capital, there will be quite stringent disclosures required. So you will know the name of the company that is hosting the investment note on BR Capital. You will know the purpose. You will also have purview of the credit rating report, the ESG rating report, as well as the audited report of the issue.
All right. Thanks, Sebastian. So Kokchen would like to ask why a company opts for investment notes instead of a private placement, which is a much cheaper source of capital.
Whether it's cheaper or not, I can't really comment. But okay, in just one instance that we have, it's actually a subsidiary of the company that is looking to fundraise. So that particular company did in fact consider to raise additional funds through private placement. But that particular issuer, when they came to us, and they understood that the typical time frame for hosting an investment note, going through the process of the platform, it's usually 1 to 3 months turnaround for the issuer to actually basically raise funds through BR Capital. So
Yeah, I
it
think
can potentially be shorter time to raise funds through BR Capital as compared to the private placement route. Yeah,
yep. So it's more efficient to use.
it could be.
Could be more
Potentially,
efficient, right?
potentially, yes.
Yeah, sometimes the cost of that is cheaper than the cost of equity, So when companies when they want to evaluate, fundraising alternatives, right, they could have evaluated many options before they choose investment note as one of
Right.
the
Yeah.
vehicles.
Yeah. Of course, the
Okay.
dilution of the shareholding. It's, private placement is basically enlarging the share capital pool of the company. So basically, diluting the existing shareholders typically via private placement exercise. But with raising funds through a P2P platform, basically you're just raising debt. You're not giving up any equity.
All right. Beng Kwan would like to ask, does investment note holder rank pari passu to bond holders? How is the cash flow structure for the note holder in a credit event?
Yep. So the first part to the question, I can only, again, unfortunately, I can only answer in the context of BR Capital. Usually, the investment notes that are hosted on BR Capital are senior unsecured or senior secured. So it's a senior ranking. Not too sure about the other P2P platforms. I'm not sure whether they are actually issuing junior unsecured investment notes or not.
All right. Thanks, Sebastian.
Thank you.
We have seen a couple of questions to ask you to explain again what is investment note because they were late to the session. Maybe you can give a 1 or 2 liners about investment note.
Yeah. So maybe I'll just go back to the slides. So essentially, investment note is a form of monetary loan from investors to an issuer. Issuer being a business. Essentially a monetary loan in essence.
All right.
That answers the question.
Yep. I think you have also addressed this already, but they have also got question asked, who are the shareholders of BR Capital? Maybe you can repeat that.
Sure. Just pull out the slides again. So BR Capital is actually a subsidiary under Bursa Malaysia. We are a joint venture, 51% owned by Bursa Malaysia, 49% by RAM Holdings Berhad.
Okay, so it's 51% owned by Bursa and 5% owned by RAM. 51% owned by Bursa, 49% owned by RAM, yeah?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, any more questions? So the next question here is, can we buy insurance to insure all this kind of default event?
Not sure whether, from what I understand, some P2P platforms do provide such option. At BR Capital, we are working with multiple partners, but as of now, there isn't that option at BR Capital right now.
Are the notes rated by RAM since RAM is a shareholder? So this is a question by Van.
Yes, they are. They are rated by RAM. So it's a different rating scale as compared to what they issue for bonds and sukuk. In terms of rating scale, it ranges from R1 to R9. So it's not the conventional triple A or even triple B papers. So different credit rating scale, but of course, the new rating scale is actually, of course, reference back to the default study done since they were established in the 1990s.
All right. So what are the details that will be provided to retail investors once we invest in investment notes? Like, do you provide CTOS report of the respective company? So this is the question by Jason.
So on BR Capital, yes, issue CTOS report on respective issuers will basically be published on the platform. But also again, like what I mentioned earlier, there will be other forms of disclosures from the issuer. Definitely, you would know the name of the issuer, the purpose, the business that they are in, their expansion plans, and other facts about the issue.
All right, thanks, Sebastian. So since RAM is a shareholder, would there be any bias when you rate your own products?
No, I mean, of course, RAM is a credible party. They are one of two rating agencies sort of approved by SE. So, of course, in terms of their opinions, it would be independent.
All right. The next question I see on my screen is, how is BR Capital different from the rest of the P2P firms?
So, yeah, if I may pull out this slide. So essentially, BR Capital, we are only able to host investment notes that are at least 5 million. Whereas some of the other P2P platforms are able to actually host notes that are below 5 million. Sorry, if I may just correct myself earlier. Sorry, the CTOS report of the issuers will not be published, but there will be a comment on basically the character, basically the history, credit history of the issuers on BR Capital. And just to clarify.
All right, thanks for clarification.
Thank you.
So in other words, BR Capital serve more to mid-tier companies and PLC lah. You don't serve very small startup, right?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of debt fundraising, typically, especially if you're talking about the context of BR Capital, because we are only allowed to host investment notes that are above 5 million, there's basically a need, a requirement from the issuer to basically have certain level of margins for us to be comfortable enough to host the investment note on their platform. So unlike in terms of the contrast between credit investing and so equity investing, credit when investors are providing a monetary loan to the issuer, they are basically the issuers will basically promise a return, a fixed return, say for example, 6 to 9% per annum to the investors. So it's a commitment by the issuer, or AKA the debt fundraiser, to the investors to for the investors to basically receive a fixed amount of return as promised under the respective documents. So in contrast with equity, issuers of equity might not promise those sort of fixed returns.
I see. Are you also able to get the license to, host investment note that is less than 5 million ringgit, or this is a either or? You either pick the bigger one, or you actually allow you to actually get you to pick the smaller one.
I mean, I can't really specifically answer the question, but yeah, like I mentioned earlier, for now, we are only able to host investment notes that are 5 million.
Are there many Are there many platforms that are in that space? I mean, at allowing investment that is not less than 5 million.
I'm not too sure, but ultimately, for BR Capital, ultimately, we like to try to support basically the media companies in Malaysia, as they're basically the back, as SMEs and also MTCs are basically a strong backbone to any economy in any country. So in terms of maybe I might be able to specifically answer. So there are two platforms out there that are able to only host investment notes that are 5 million and above. So two platforms.
Two other platform, or one of them is
including BR Capital. Sorry.
all right, two platform only lah. So you are
yes.
You are a much bigger player.
Yeah, I can't comment on that.
All right. What is the liquidity to invest in this investment note?
Liquidity for BR Capital, I'm assuming. So BR Capital, we are working in terms of liquidity. It's definitely part of our consideration to allow investors to liquidate their investments ahead of schedule. It's definitely a requirement. A lot of investors have actually asked that. But for now, it's basically a hold to maturity investment on BR Capital.
Okay, hold to maturity kind of investment. All right. What is the typical size of the turnover and equity of these issuers?
So, like I mentioned earlier, bare minimum criteria, if they were to host the note 5 million and above, bare minimum, they have to be able to pay back the principal, of course, including the interest as well. But in terms of, if we look at chronologically, interests, basically, as with banks, we look at multiple ratios, including interest coverage, debt service coverage, of basically the projections provided by the issuers. Of course, the projections have to be somewhat sensitized by us so that we can be sort of comfortable enough to sort of come up with an opinion on the issuer that that particular issuer can actually repay back at end of maturity of the investment loan.
All right. Okay, so would you do any CTOS on the sponsors of the issuers?
Yes. So just if I may correct myself earlier, the investors will not have it, but as a platform, we will conduct searches, whether it's specifically CTOS or other providers. I can't really comment here, but we will basically run thorough checks on the issuers.
All right. I think you also addressed this question, but I've seen again, so maybe you can address this. Does RAM use similar rating scale like corporate bonds?
RAM has a different rating scale for investment notes hosted on BR Capital. So it's a rating scale that ranges between R1 to R9. So it's different to the conventional bond and sukuk rating scale.
All right. This question on my screen is pretty interesting. If RAM conducts rating on the issuer with comprehensive credit report, why do you need to do double work?
Ultimately, as a platform, we would like to safeguard our investors' money. So, I mean, although RAM is also, doing thorough checks and thorough due diligence, assessing the credit worthiness of the issuer. At our end, BR Capital, we also have to run our own set of due diligence process, just to be comfortable, to host the note on our platform. So RAM's process is actually an independent process. Just to elaborate further on rating scale, although it's a different sort of scale, R1 to R9 as compared to AAA to the rest, they adopt the same rating mechanism to conduct rating of issuers of BR Capital.
Okay, so your rating is from R1 to R9. So what is like R1 equivalent for the bond and sukuk rating?
Unfortunately, I cannot comment on that, but ultimately it's basically a discovery by the investors based on the 1 year default. Yeah. So investors would actually have to basically go through and understand thoroughly the new scale by RAM for investment notes on BR Capital and also the conventional bond and sukuk rating scale.
All right, understand that. Shireen would like to ask, so when it comes to P2P investing, do we get to choose which investment note to invest? Much like we choose unit trust fund.
Yeah, so BR Capital, like I mentioned, it's direct. So when you look at the investment notes on the BR Capital platform, you will see respective issuers on the platform. You will have purview and so fact sheet, credit rating report by RAM. Whereas if you compare to the unit trust, like I mentioned earlier, it might be indirect. It's a pool of various investments.
All right. Thanks, Sebastian. It looks like we have addressed all questions on our Q&A panel. So we had a very interactive Q&A sessions. So thank you so much for speaking to us about investment note. I guess most of us here would have a better idea about investment notes.
Thank you, Shane.
All right.
Thank you to all our audience as well for spending the last hour and 5 minutes. Thank you.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, you just heard from the Senior Relationship Manager of BR Capital, who is Sebastian Yong. Thank you so much.